In 1953, a mother in West Virginia fed her entire family breakfast for 11 cents. Today that same breakfast costs $14, and it's not even as good. These are the 25 smartest poor man breakfasts that vanished from American kitchens. And somebody doesn't want you to remember them. Number 7. Bread and bacon grease. Before butter was affordable and before margarine was trusted, bacon grease was the spread of the American working class, and nobody thought twice about it because it was simply what you did with the fat left in the pan after Sunday's bacon. Mothers saved every single drop of rendered fat in a coffee can beside the stove, a wide-mouthed can with a lid, always sitting right there next to the burner, always ready. Mornings started with a thick slice of white bread pulled from a wax paper wrapper, smeared generously with a spoonful of that warm dripping, and finished with a hard shake of salt. That was breakfast. In 1952, a loaf of bread cost about 14 cents. The grease was completely free, a byproduct of cooking that would have been thrown straight into the trash in any modern kitchen without a second thought. Children ate it standing at the counter with their schoolbooks tucked under one arm. Fathers wrapped a second slice in wax paper and dropped it into the lunch pail on their way out the door before the sun came up. The flavor was smoky and salty and deeply savory in a way that bland toast spread with margarine could never come close to replicating. Nutritionists demonized animal fats in the 1970s, and the coffee can disappeared from American stovetops almost overnight, thrown out, hidden away, replaced by vegetable oil in a plastic bottle. But recent studies have shown that bacon grease contains significantly less saturated fat than butter, and that the fatty acid profile is actually more favorable than many of the processed oils that replaced it. We threw away real flavor and a generations-old tradition because of science that turned out to be incomplete. The coffee can is gone from most kitchens now. The tradition it represented is gone with it. Number 6. Cornmeal mush. In Appalachia and across the rural South, breakfast often began before the sun came up with a pot of cornmeal mush so thick that a wooden spoon stood upright in it without falling. Mother stirred plain cornmeal into boiling salted water and cooked it low and slow, stirring patiently, until it turned creamy and smooth and dense and warm in a way that filled the kitchen with a smell that meant the day was starting right. A 5-pound sack of cornmeal cost about 20 cents in the early 1950s, and it lasted a family 2 full weeks of breakfasts. Served hot with a drizzle of sorghum molasses or a splash of cold buttermilk poured over the top, it was the meal that kept sharecroppers and coal miners and field hands on their feet until noon without complaint. Children scraped their bowls completely clean. Fathers ate in silence, savoring the warmth before heading out into weather that had no mercy for a man with an empty stomach. The leftover mush, and there was always leftover mush because mothers always made more than they needed, was poured into a greased loaf pan and left to chill overnight until it was firm enough to slice. The next morning those slices went into a hot cast iron skillet with a spoonful of lard and fried until golden and crispy on both sides, and if there was an egg to spare it went on top. That fried version was Saturday morning's reward, the thing children looked forward to all week. Today cornmeal mush has been completely erased from the American breakfast table by instant oatmeal packets and sugary cereals that come in boxes with cartoon characters on the front. A breakfast that cost 1 penny per serving and delivered real sustained nutrition was replaced by one that costs $1 and delivers half the nourishment. Nobody made that trade consciously. It happened slowly, one advertisement at a time. Number 5. Milk toast. When someone in the family was sick, when money was tight, or when there was simply nothing else left in the cupboard and payday was still 2 days away, mothers made milk toast. A slice of bread was toasted lightly. Not too dark, just enough to give it a little structure, then buttered lightly and placed in a deep bowl and covered with warm whole milk that had been heated gently on the stove until it was just steaming, not boiling. A pinch of salt. A tiny pinch of sugar if the children were eating it and you wanted it to feel like something special. That was the entire recipe. The bread softened slowly in the warm milk and absorbed it and became something between soup and porridge. Warm and gentle and easy on the stomach and completely comforting in a way that nothing more complicated could have been. In the 1950s, milk was delivered to the doorstep 3 times a week for about 20 cents a quart. Combined with day-old bread that cost almost nothing, milk toast fed sick children who couldn't keep anything else down and adults with empty wallets and long weeks ahead of them equally well. The simplicity was entirely the point. No skill required, no special equipment, no ingredients that weren't already in every kitchen in America. Just warmth and sustenance in a bowl made by someone who was doing the best they could with what they had. By the 1970s, milk toast had vanished almost entirely from American kitchens, replaced by canned soup from a can and crackers from a box. But anyone who grew up eating it will tell you without hesitation that nothing made since has matched its quiet, gentle, unpretentious comfort on a cold morning when everything felt hard. Number 4. Red-eye gravy in biscuits. In the rural South, country ham was sliced thin and fried hard in a cast-iron skillet until it was deeply browned at the edges and the fat had rendered into the pan and the whole kitchen smelled like something ancient and specific and irreplaceable. Then the pan was deglazed with black coffee, a splash poured straight from the pot into the hot pan and stirred around to lift every bit of brown dripping from the bottom of the iron. That was red-eye gravy. The name came from the reddish eye of fat that formed in the center of the gravy when it settled in the bowl, looking up at you like something alive. Mothers split open fresh buttermilk biscuits made from scratch that morning and ladled that thin, salty, coffee-tinged gravy over the top until it soaked into the bread and pooled in the crevices. The combination was savory and slightly bitter and rich all at once, nothing like anything that has come out of a modern kitchen or a fast food window. Country ham cost about 4 cents a pound in 1954, but it was so intensely salty and concentrated in flavor that a single thin slice could flavor an entire pan of gravy. The coffee was already brewed and sitting on the stove. The biscuits cost pennies to make. The whole breakfast fed a family of 6 for less than a quarter. Red-eye gravy cannot be found in any restaurant chain in America today. It is too simple, too regional, and too completely dependent on a cast-iron skillet that has been seasoned by decades of daily use to survive in a world built around speed and consistency and portion control. Fast food killed it. But everyone who ever tasted it remembers exactly what it tasted like and will tell you that nothing has replaced it. Number 3. Oatmeal with lard. Before brown sugar and maple syrup and sliced banana became the standard toppings for a bowl of morning oats, families who could not afford sweeteners did something that sounds wrong to modern ears but was simply practical. They stirred a spoonful of lard and a generous pinch of salt into their hot oatmeal and ate it savory. The fat made the oatmeal rich and filling and coating in a way that plain oats cooked in water never achieved, stretching a bowl that might have left a working man hungry by 9 in the morning into something that lasted genuinely until noon. A canister of rolled oats cost about 19 cents in 1955 and it made a week of breakfasts for a family. The lard was already sitting in a tin beside the stove because lard was always sitting beside the stove. Children did not love the savory version. They ate it because there was nothing else and because mothers stood at the stove and watched until every single spoonful was gone and the bowl was scraped clean. The unsweetened, fatty, honest version of oatmeal has been completely forgotten in the decades since. Today we drown oats in sugar and honey and flavored syrup and expensive nut butters without ever realizing that the original American way to eat oatmeal was salty and simple and built entirely around the idea of fuel rather than pleasure. Modern nutritionists now recommend adding healthy fats to oatmeal specifically for sustained energy release and blood sugar stability. Our great-grandmothers figured that out 70 years ago with a tin of lard that cost almost nothing. Number 2. Fried egg sandwich. Not the elaborate constructions on social media with avocado and imported hot sauce and artisan bread toasted in clarified butter. The 1950s fried egg sandwich was one egg cracked into a cast iron pan that still held the bacon grease from this morning's bacon, fried until the white was fully set and the edges had gone lacy and brown and slightly crispy from the hot fat, then slapped between 2 plain slices of white bread with a shake of salt and a grind of pepper. That was it. That was breakfast, and sometimes lunch, and on the hardest weeks sometimes dinner too. Eggs cost about 60 cents a dozen in 1956, which meant 1 egg per sandwich made breakfast for an entire family for less than a dime total. Factory workers ate them wrapped in newspaper on the bus to the 7 o'clock shift. Children ate them standing at the kitchen table while mothers packed lunches and fathers put on their coats. The bread soaked up the runny yolk and the fat from the pan gave everything a flavor that no amount of expensive sourdough or grass-fed butter could replicate because the flavor came not from the quality of the ingredients but from the seasoning of the pan and the confidence of the cook who had made the same sandwich 1,000 times before. We have turned the fried egg sandwich into a gourmet item that costs $8 at a brunch restaurant and arrives on a plate with microgreens. In 1955 it was the cheapest thing a mother could make and it was perfect exactly the way it was and nobody needed to improve it. Number 1. Tomato gravy. In the Ozarks and across the Upper South, tomato gravy was what you made when the pantry held almost nothing, when there was a can of stewed tomatoes on the shelf and some flour and some bacon drippings in the pan and not much else and 6 people sitting at the table waiting for breakfast. Mothers made a simple roux with the drippings and flour, cooking it until it smelled slightly nutty and had lost its raw flour taste, then stirred in the canned tomatoes, crushing them against the side of the pan with a spoon, and let everything simmer together until it thickened into a gravy that was tangy and rich and savory and tasted far more complex than its ingredients had any right to produce. Ladled over split biscuits or thick cornbread, the whole dish cost less than 15 cents and could feed a table of 8 people and leave them full until midday. The acidity of the tomatoes cut through the richness of the bacon fat in a way that created something genuinely balanced and satisfying, not just filling. During the Depression, tomato gravy kept entire rural communities alive for weeks at a time. By the 1950s, it had become so embedded in the daily rhythm of certain regions that families never thought to write the recipe down because everyone already knew it. It lived in the hands, not on paper. When those families moved to cities for factory work, tomato gravy stayed behind on the farm. Their children grew up eating toast and jelly and never learned what their grandmothers had started every morning with. Food historians have called tomato gravy one of the most important lost dishes in American culinary history. It fed millions of people through the hardest decades this country has ever known, and almost nobody outside of a few small communities remembers it today.